Welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. My name is Joel Goldberg. It is Thursday morning. Again, a reminder that this podcast, as we sit here right now, I believe it's episode 74. I jumped those numbers just a little bit with a triple header on Tuesday. We're sticking to one per day. I think that's enough work, 5 guests per week. But ultimately, this week it'll be 7 guests, and I just kind of crammed a bunch of cool stuff in on Tuesday. Baseball, I believe, is starting in a few weeks. That's the reason why I moved this to 9 a.m. We shouldn't have any 9 a.m. baseball, but, we'll have some 1 o'clock games, and I'll have to get down to the stadium around 10 o'clock. So this podcast will continue. Couldn't do it without the support of my friends at Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. If you've been watching this, it's been streaming live every single day, that I've had all types of guests from all types of fields, and really the hope is just to gain some perspective from their worlds, and certainly perspectives that can help in terms of culture and leadership, and also just learning and pick me up, and we're all going through a lot of adversity right now. And the guy that I have on today is someone that I had the chance to meet recently, the way we all meet people these days, and that would be virtually. And he's a guy that, first off, has great attire, phenomenal attire, because he's wearing this shirt, the jacket of my favorite hockey team and the Stanley Cup champion, still the defending Stanley Cup champion, Shep Hyken. Shep, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. Yes, still defending. And now we can officially say we are the longest defenders of the Cup. No team has held it as long as we have without having to actually defend it.
Yes. Well, hopefully there's an opportunity to defend this thing at some point.
Yeah.
I digress. I know you and I could sit here and talk hockey. Thanks for not wearing the Cardinal shirt, only because it would spark all types of rivalries that we know already exist.
I've got a George Brett signed bat over there, if that makes you feel any more comfortable with my sports memorabilia collection.
Yeah. No, and I know it's a good one. And by the way, my sponsor, Enterprise Bank, has significant traction in the marketplace in both Kansas City and St. Louis. So we're all good here. You know what? We all would like to just get back to work. Of course, you're extremely busy. I'm extremely busy outside of the sports world. And when you and I met a few weeks ago, I knew I wanted to have you on because you're a guy that has such, a unique perspective in terms of the amount of people that you dive in and build relationships with around not St. Louis, not Missouri, not the Midwest, not the country, but around the world. And so, first and foremost, I mean, Shep Hyken's been at this thing since what, the 80s, early 80s, maybe.
Early 80s,
how'd you get into
1983?
How'd you get into the business of speaking around the world and customer experience? What was your path to get here?
Yeah. And by the way, just prior to jumping on this show, I was talking to clients over in India. So, and it's amazing. We have, my version of a podcast is Amazing Business Radio, and we track what countries are listening most. And India is always number 2 or 3. Have a bunch of friends over in Australia, thousands of friends over there that are following. Anyway, 1983, I graduated college in 82, and I was working for this company, and I'd work for them summer jobs. And while I was in college, it was a full-time job, kind of executive training program, going to school, working there, graduate, think this is it for the rest of my life. And 3 months later, they say, we're selling the company. And that's it. What am I going to do with myself? So we can go all the way back even further. When I was just 12 years old, I started my first business. I had a birthday party magic show business. And eventually I graduated to doing nightclubs. And actually one of the best jobs I ever had at age 16 was comedy and magic at the Playboy Club. That was my job. I get to entertain at the Playboy Club. Wow. What a job for a 16-year-old kid. Anyway, college work. I had my regular job, and of course, on the weekends, I'd work in nightclubs. But when I found out I didn't have a job, what am I going to do? I saw a couple of motivational speakers. You probably know who Zig Ziglar is, and Tom Hopkins does a lot of sales, still around today. And I said, you know what? I could do that. I have the entertainment background. I have the, business background. Why not? And so I wrote a speech, and it was all focused on customer service. And that's where it all started. And I stayed in that lane, service and experience, really for the last almost 38 years, 37 plus years.
And here you are still. I'll go right to it, though. The world has changed, yet you are still busy, and we use the pivot word every single day. But you got no choice. I mean, you either sit and wait for it all to clear up and say, okay,
Yep.
I'm not going to get on a plane and fly to Australia or India to speak to these people, or I'm going to figure out how to do it now. What's the adjustment been like for you?
Well, obviously, air travel came to an immediate stop because basically clients, they're not allowed to get in groups of more than 10 or 50. And I'm going, well, what about the 1,000 people in that ballroom that I was supposed to speak at next week and 2 weeks after that and whatever? That has gone away. So the pivot for me is to do more presentations. On the other side of this wall is my studio. We have multiple cameras. We have a wall that's all green for green screen. We have a white wall, which we can put anything on. We can hang pictures if we want. But we make it look however the client needs us to make it look. And, I would say that as a speaker, I would go out on an average year in the last few years of doing about 50 speeches a year. They say, wow, that sounds like a lot. Well, I was used to doing one year I did 180 some odd. It was like crazy. My wife said, if you do this again, you're going to come home. I won't be here. But in the prior years, I've done maybe 15 to 20 virtual presentations, webinars, online Zoom type calls as we know them now. And now I'm doing 15 a month. And honestly, I don't see that changing. Even when we could go back to being on stage, I still think we're going to do an incredibly large number of virtual presentations because, number one, it's more affordable for certain clients, especially if you try to book me 6 months from now, it's like, I'm going to treat you like a regular speech. But if it's like 2 weeks from now, it's like, what can you do to help my company? Can you do a virtual presentation? I am in. I'm all about let's give. Let's do it what we have to do to make people more successful, especially in times like right now.
So what are you hearing from people? I mean, I know for me over the last few months, early on in March and April, it felt like the mood and just the uncertainty changed by the day, if not even by the hour. And then it was kind of by the week, and maybe now it's by the month. I feel like you could kind of label each month with a different theme in terms of the progression, and maybe there's more of a comfort level. What have you heard from so many of the folks that you talk to?
So I would say if you had to divide it into the 3 months, because mid-March is when really most companies or most of the country started to shut down here, and a lot of businesses were forced to, if not pull back, completely shut down. So you got March to mid-April, April to mid-May, and now we're just coming out now in June. Companies are in mid-June, late June, now early July actually. You look at 3 months. Number one was fear. What the heck is going on here? I don't know what's going to happen with the rest of my life. Number two is, okay, I've come to grips with this isn't going to change, but I have to change. And so there's this question of what I need to do. And the third month was, I think I've got this. A lot of companies it's taken that cycle. And as we supposedly come out of this and look at and I hate that term new normal. You know what? There's no such thing as a new normal. Either it's normal or it's not normal. And what's happening in the future is going to be normal for the future. What happened in the past is normal. The good old days, by the way, were just 3.5 months ago, when everything was normal.
Right.
I was, in the good old days meant that, I might, be bummed out about the traffic on the way to the game, complain about the traffic. I'd love to complain about the traffic on the way to a baseball game right now. How about this? I complained that I didn't get my free upgrade on my airline. I had to sit in the back between two big guys named Bubba. I would love to be sitting between two guys named Bubba on my way to that speaking engagement with 1,000 people in a conference room in Las Vegas. But those were the good old days. And we're going to have days that are just as good, if not even better, coming out as we go back into, what we would say the business that we can anticipate will happen. So,
funny sidebar story, and it has no value other than to hopefully put a smile on people's face. But I believe my last year working in St. Louis which was 2007. Dan McLaughlin, the play-by-play guy for the Cardinals, longtime play-by-play guy, and I had worked a Cardinals Dodgers game at Dodger Stadium, and I don't think that the games were televised, or they were televised nationally for the weekend. So we got to go home, and so we took a red eye home. We barely made the flight. I mean, traffic and all that type of stuff. And I'm jacked up and fired up after the game. You get a little bit of adrenaline, so I get a couple of quick drinks at the airport, jump on the plane, and I have a middle seat for this red eye between two Bubbas, but they were women, but they were both. I think their name could have been Bubba. And imagine falling asleep after those couple of drinks and waking up at 3 a.m, needing to ask Bubba to your left to get out and head to the bathroom. So
I hate when that happens.
Except for now we would take it, right?
We would take it. We would love it, and we would look over and say, "Hey, please put your mask back on."
Right. I hope so. But here's the thing: our perspectives have changed a little bit. Can that be a positive out of this? There have been a lot of positives. There have been a lot of opportunities. I think it's all there for people. You do have to work for it. I know for myself personally, I'm a different person today, and some of that has to do with having been out of work at a time when I should have been, back covering baseball. But some of it's just seeing things differently. Are you experiencing the same?
I think what happens is anytime there's a crisis of any type, this was a pandemic and it's a terrible crisis. It puts your personality under a magnifying glass. So we can look at it, because I work with companies. The companies that would normally do good things for the community all of a sudden started doing more good things. The companies that were always struggling, that were recognized as laggards in customer experience, they were even worse than ever before. And I think people's personalities do the same thing. Those that are, I will admit, when all this happened, I went into a 2-week, what's going on here? I didn't know. And my wife and one of my daughters came back to St. Louis where I live because she was furloughed. Good news is she's back to work. But they said, "You're awful quiet every night. And, what are you doing all day in your office? It's nothing to do." I think the optimistic people, and by the way, I was just interpreting what was going on. And then I recognized, here's my opportunities. People who are wired that way to find the good in virtually any situation, they do. You should have on this show a guy, and you may know who he is, Dr. Jason Selk. Do you know Jason?
I don't, but I'm going to write that down.
So Jason worked with the Cardinals during, I guess, when Albert Pujols was in a slump. He worked with Albert. He's a psychologist, therapist, and he has this thing called the RSM, result focused solution, RFS. I may have the initials turned around. And what he said is, no matter what your situation is, what's one thing, even if it's the smallest thing that you can do to make it better? Okay, the smallest thing. And it might mean, you know what, I'm going to go for a walk for 15 minutes. I can do that. And I'm going to feel better after that. Well, there's an example. Or we can look at much bigger opportunities. So I think what happens in times of stress is magnified personalities. Those that were optimistic seem to be overly optimistic in looking at what's going forward because they want to be. And those that are pessimistic are doing the same. Half glass full or half empty? I'm one of those guys. Today I'll say I'm a very optimistic person, but the answer is yes. It is half full and it is half empty. But I bet if you ask me why I'm not willing to commit, I will never commit to the half empty, but I'll commit to we don't know what the future really is going to hand us. So reality says I'm going to try to get the best out of everything. I will accept whatever happens to me, and whatever does happen to me, I'm going to probably celebrate it. It's got to be better than nothing at all.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about that because I think one of the really important pieces of culture and building culture and the right teams is having people with positive energy givers. And that doesn't mean, I tell audiences, that doesn't mean you have to be the loudest guy in the room or the loudest woman in the room. That doesn't even need to mean that you're extroverted. You could be an introvert. But the people that that others gravitate towards, the people that others want to be around. Now, you are a high energy guy, in your positivity, but also just, the way you speak, the way you get people motivated. I'm not just talking about on stage too. How important is that energy?
It's really important. Sometimes it drives my wife a little crazy. She says, Shep, you're like in the middle of the sentence, you fall asleep, you wake up, you continue where you left off. So I'm like that Energizer bunny. But, the whole idea of celebrating life and what comes your way and saying, you know what, there's a lot worse that could happen to me. And I always think when there, if something bad is happening, I think about some of the friends that I have that have lost loved ones, that have had disease, that have had, maybe they've lost their job and they become devastated because they couldn't pick themselves up and they've gone into depression. By the way, the thing for me is I have a very, very close friend who suffers from great depression. I try to understand it. I know I can't possibly feel what he is feeling, but I know I can be there for him. And when we're together, we have a good time together. And those are moments, and I guess to grasp and hold on to. What happened in the last 3 months, and I know we're getting off the topic a little bit, but, I've had a chance to be with all 3 of my kids. One of my children stayed with me for 11 weeks. I don't know if that's ever going to happen with me in her adult life ever again. Another one stayed with me for 2 weeks. The other one, he may come home and stay with me forever if things don't work. No, I'm just kidding. He's a musician in Nashville, and he's doing great. He's putting it all together. But the opportunity to spend time with the family and the kids, that's been powerful.
Yeah, I felt the same way. It's the first time that I've ever experienced and been home from morning till night, from, waking up to going to bed, for my wife's birthday, my birthday, our anniversary, my daughter's birthday, Mother's Day, and Father's Day. That's 6 events that I'm lucky if I'm around for 1 or 2 of them, and that's just the baseball life.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
and look what you get to do.
Yeah.
Now, my wife does say there is truth to that saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. She goes,
I think
we've never been together so many nights in a row, so many days in a row. I think you need to go get some speaking engagements somewhere for a long time.
Yeah.
Go out on the road.
I think the question has been, when does the season start again, and how come you're not traveling? So
exactly.
Yeah, we're not going to be traveling this year for baseball, but again, same thing. And I said it on a recent baseball show that we did. I don't really care what it looks like. I just want to get back to work. So, that's certainly an important piece of it. So for you in the customer experience world, I mean, so much is about relationships, not just for you, but with those that you're speaking to and your clients. What have you heard? What have you talked about in terms of maintaining, building, cultivating relationships right now from a distance? Because guess what? And this is true. You can't stop even if you don't get a chance to have that handshake.
Right. There's so many studies that say during a downturn in the economy, a recession, if you will, a crisis like this, you can't cut your marketing budget. It's dangerous to do so. My philosophy has been, this is a perfect opportunity to increase the experience through the relationship. But if you're going to cut, don't cut in a place that's going to be obvious to a customer. I have a client still. He's a friend more than anything. He has a small group of hotels, and his occupancy rate went from 80 some odd %, almost sold out every night, to less than 20%. And he had to start cutting people. And one of the areas he cut was his housekeeping staff, which I understand you cut some of the housekeeping staff. But he cut it so thin, I said to him, in good times or bad, if there's less than 20% of people staying in the hotel, there's still people staying there. And if they experience a dirty room, doesn't matter whether it's in good times or bad times, that's a dirty room and they are not coming back. Okay, so don't cut what's obvious. Recognize the opportunity for marketing isn't just throwing dollars into an ad budget or a campaign. It could be making sure that experience is so good that your customers will do your marketing for you. This may be the time, depending upon the type of business you're in, to get more testimonials, to get more online reviews, to get more, word of mouth by just asking, hey, can, the question, the net promoter score question on a scale of 0 to 10, what's the likelihood that you'd recommend me? And for those that don't know what that is, 0 to 6 is what you call a detractor. That person's not going to recommend you. They may even say bad things about you. A 7 or 8 means you were average, satisfactory, and means there's nothing great. And by the way, the person that gives you a 7 or an 8 may be leaning more toward being a detractor versus the 9 or 10, which is your promoter. And if somebody says, oh, I'd give you a 9 or a 10, which means they'd be willing to recommend you, don't just say, okay, great, thank you. Say, okay, who would you recommend me to? Can you give me 3 or 4 names? Can I call them and use your name? And there's no reason you can't do that. In times when it's slow, I mentioned relationship just a few minutes ago. This is the time to pick up the telephone and call people and say, hey, I'm not even trying to sell. I've been going back and talking to every one of my clients that I've worked with over the past 3 or so years just to say hello. Why? I've got time. And maybe we'll be able to work together in the future. But more than anything, I want to thank you for the past. And like, there I am again, celebrating life, celebrating what's happened in the past, right? So we say, I love what we did in the past. Maybe there's a chance, but I just want you to know that I'm here thinking about you during this tough time. If there's anything I can do, even if it's just to talk, please let me know. Not one person has ever said, I can't believe you're calling me with that message in a time like today. On the other hand, if I'd have called to sell, hey, I'm doing this new virtual presentation. Now's the time to hire me because your people can't be out. They're going to go, dude, bad timing. We're not buying anything right now. So I want to make myself available to help. One of the things I offered up, and it's probably dangerous that I'm going to share this with you right now to all the people that are listening to the show, but in those first few weeks, I called my clients and I said, I will do a presentation, a virtual presentation, no charge. If you want me to come in and talk to your people for 25, 30 minutes, let's do it. I've got an agenda as far as a few items I'd like to cover about customer amazement and a few thoughts regarding how to deal with this pandemic. But beyond that, I want you to ask me questions and what I can do to help your people. And they go, and you're not going to charge for that? No, I just want to be here for you. And by the way, I want to practice these and get better and better too. So that's the way to do it. Joel, I'll bet that you're an announcer and you've been doing this for years, but I'll bet this particular structure of doing these podcasts, you were probably pretty good starting off because of your background. I'll bet you're better today than you were 2 months ago.
Of course.
I
tell kids all the time, don't get so wrapped up from a broadcast standpoint. Don't get so wrapped up in I have to call the college, football or basketball, or I want to be at the sport. I don't care if it's swimming, if it's field hockey, if it's wrestling, if it's baseball, softball, whatever it is. The more you do it, the more you will get better, the more you will get comfortable. It's no different than the first time you got on stage versus now. And the next time you get on stage, it'll be like getting back on a bike, but it'll be a little bit different because it's been longer than it was. And, and on and on. Yes, I mean, like people say to me all the time, do you get nervous getting on TV? And I say, no, I've been doing it my whole life. Do you get nervous walking into a meeting? Maybe for a really big one, but it's like driving a car. But you get good at that by doing it over and over and over again.
Every time I walk on stage, it's not so much nerves as I'm anxious, I'm excited. I pride myself on wanting to always be prepared. And by the way, that's one of the things I learned early on. I'm not going to say I ever walked on stage unprepared, but there were times that as I was walking on stage, I questioned whether I was prepared enough. There's certain types of businesses that I just couldn't put my arms around. These, technology businesses that sell some solution that they use words that I don't understand, and I'd be doing everything I could to learn about them. But I always had this uncomfortable feeling. It's like if you walked out, your team, but you didn't study the other team, and you know enough to know who the stars are, but it's like you probably can get away with it. I don't ever want to feel that way. And I don't think you do either. I want to walk on stage. There's 3 secrets to a successful speech. Obviously practice is going to make you better and better, but if you are out of the box and you want to just jump to the next level right away, number 1, know your material. Know it really, really well. That's your preparation. Number 2, know who your audience is. and know who you're getting ready to present to. You won't be so nervous walking into that board meeting to make that presentation if you know who that board is, what their issues are, what their concerns are. And number 3, know yourself. And what I mean by that is, in my younger days, in my 20s, I learned very quickly that if I would go, the client would say, let's go out the night before your presentation. And we'd go out, we'd have a great dinner. And I don't really drink, but we'd stay out late. I'd get up the next morning and I was tired. Now I know myself. Well, back then I learned very quickly. In bed by 10. That's the rule. I don't care what we're doing and where we go. It's in bed by 10 because tomorrow I've got to be my best. And I can't be my best if I get in at midnight and I short myself by 2 hours of sleep. So know yourself and know what if your routine is I get up in the morning and I work out and that makes me at a whole new level of energy. That's what I want to be doing in the morning. I know that I don't want to skip that. I know it works for me. So 3 things: your audience, your information, your audience, and yourself. When you do that, no matter how inexperienced you might be, you're going to be better than you could have been.
And then I say trust your instincts too.
Yeah.
And if you've done your preparation, you can handle the curveballs that are thrown your way because you already know your material. It's not a matter of memorizing; it's a matter of knowing your stuff.
Yep.
And when you know your stuff, you don't have to be perfectly scripted because you know your material. You can be yourself. Few comments that have come in. Becky Wilson, great idea. Calling clients and getting current with them. I've seen the same in terms of that. Kiana Sink says this is really good. Transferred skills, and I don't know if she's being serious or sarcastic. In bed by 10. Take Shep's word for that one. It is an important key. A little bit tougher for me from a baseball standpoint because I'm getting back.
I mean, obviously,
to work.
It's
all relative.
In bed by 10 is for me. Other than going into extra innings, if you're doing a 3-day series in a row, you need to know when you go to bed so you have your best energy the next day.
That's right. Changes a little bit for a day game, no doubt about it. And speaking of baseball, let me get to my baseball-themed questions. It's not Cardinals, Royals, or anything Major League Baseball, or maybe it could be, but professionally speaking, with this career now that goes back to 1983 and even before, what's the biggest home run you've hit?
Wow. Shoot, there's so many, the Grand Slam home runs. I'm going to give you, if it's okay, I want to cheat and give you 2 or 3. I mean, some of the biggest are the best choices I've made. I joined the National Speakers Association back in 1988, about 5 years into my career. My mistake was not having joined them earlier. Without a doubt, the best learning platform for me to learn how to build my business, not just be a better speaker, but really about the business. Certain clients and understanding how to work with. There was an epiphany I had one day. By the way, I still go to this program now, 20 years, the strategic coach. And one of the questions I was asked was, if you look back on your clients, look at who's paid you the most and see what the commonality was. And get this, this is a home run. I figured out that my most lucrative clients never hired me to work for their company. They gifted me or sponsored me to speak at other events. So when I realized this, I said, these are the kinds of companies I need to call, and that helped multiply the number of dates I did. So those are a couple of them. So big Grand Slams.
Yeah, love the Grand Slams. We also, I say in this day and age of baseball, there's a lot of striking out, but we all strike out, and you're not going to get there without giving that a try. So how about a swing and a miss and what you learned from it?
Swing and a miss. Boy, every time, you think you're going to have that client and it doesn't go through, that's a strikeout. But you know what? You got to get up to the plate. And you got to have a few strikeouts in order to get that perfect pitch where you can knock it over the fence. I'd say the biggest mistakes I've made, I would say number one, it's not a strikeout. The first book. Should have written that book earlier, just like I should have joined the Speakers Association earlier. If you are going to be a professional speaker, that book is credibility. The book done the right way becomes your best business card. If you can get them, if you work with a publisher, work to get that publisher to sell you that book at a fairly reasonable cost so that you can give it to your clients as an example. So I would say doing the book sooner would be important. I would say investing in areas outside of my lane. For example, I was really good at creating this presentation. So a friend of mine said, let's do this other presentation outside of my business altogether, but it was still in my skill set. It's not what I do. And it was a mistake. And it was my cousin who I did it with. And we admitted when it was all over that, I probably should stick to what I do best.
Yeah, stay in your lane. I say don't stay in your lane. Try all the lanes, but then understand that if they don't work, get out of them. There's
Real
only
fast.
one way to find out.
Real fast.
Real fast.
Fail fast, get out of it.
That's right.
Yep.
Small ball, the little things that add up to the big things. That's the project I'm working on right now. In terms of that book, what are the singles, the bunts, the sacrifices in your world or in the customer experience world that lead to the home run?
Well, I mean, if you want, I'm focusing on my business. I think it'd be a good metaphor. Hard work is important, but I think everything needs to be systematized. And I think a consistent and predictable system is important in your business. All businesses, if you look at what they do well, there's a process they go through. As entrepreneurs, we pretty much, we do whatever we want when we want to do it, and that sometimes is a mistake. But I remember getting into a regimen of minimum 25 phone calls a day. Okay, these are little hits, and you realize you're only going to talk to 2 or 3 people, and of those 25 people, today that might even be less. 25 phone calls a day, and actually I said 100 a week is what I'm shooting for. But if I'm in town all week, I've got to do 25 a day. And if I did 25 a day, I realized I talked to about maybe 14%, 12 to 14% of those people. When I looked at all the numbers together, you got to understand numbers. It's what business is all about. Of those, up to 14% of the people, about 15% of those people showed interest in what I did. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that means, and of those people, I might book, maybe when I finally got 100 really good leads like that, I would probably book 2 or 3 speaking engagements. And it took a while to build those numbers up, but that's what happens. You're just constantly bunting and getting the single, getting on base, one base at a time. You're not hitting a home run. And every once in a while, by the way, that perfect pitch will come in. But you have to be there, and you have to be in the game to make that happen. I know I'm getting sports metaphorical out of this, but that's what you're about. And I think that's so important. So I think it's that little. It's the little bits. Now, today, my business is all about creating content, which drives people to want to call me. And so rather than just say, hey, I'm going to do an article every week. No, I'm going to do something every single day. Maybe one article this day, a podcast another day, a video another day. And just like what you're doing, Joel, 74 episodes, is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 74 episodes in 3 months. You're doing more than one a day. And that's what it takes. It takes the discipline. Somebody once said to me, people can't stand the monotony of success. Think about it. What it takes to be successful. A ball player goes out there, aside from their typical workouts they might do every day, how many times do they swing, in batting practice? How many times does a golfer go on the practice range and hit a driver and a 9-iron and a wedge? Thousands and thousands of times. And all we see is the end result, and it looks exciting and it looks fun. Nobody knows about the monotony of that success. And people that are willing and can be resilient to the monotony stand a greater chance of being successful in life.
And that resonates so much, and I talk about this all the time in terms of our television broadcast. You see the finished product of us being in front of the camera, but you don't see all the work behind the scenes and the preparation. You know though when it's not right, and our guys in the truck are in hours before everyone, putting in all that work. Those graphics don't load themselves. The clips don't load themselves, and on and on. And that's the same thing. All the way. You don't just show up for a speech. You don't just say, "Hey, who needs me?" and it just magically appears. Although I'd say the Shep Hyken name, certainly after all of those years of bunting and sacrifices, lends itself to, someone maybe throwing you one right down the middle of the plate because
we love it.
Well, they get a little, which is perfect. Every now and then, some of these pitchers would throw Pujols a pitch right down the plate, and we know what happened with that. I saw many of those. Okay, four final questions as we wrap it up. It's just some fun, lighthearted, rounding the bases questions. The first one, I know you got the background of magic. What's the favorite magic trick or experience of all time?
Wow, my favorite, man. I love great card tricks. And I just love seeing the people's, like, if I can do a trick and we're actually, it's like, it's like taking people back to being a little kid. So that's what I have a few good card tricks that next time we're together, I'll show them to you and you'll see what I'm
Okay,
talking.
very cool. Second question, you've traveled all around the world. You've spoken in all types of venues. What was the most unique experience?
Wow, the most unique experience, and I've been on some crazy ones. I mean, I've been all over the world. I had a great opportunity to do a 5-city tour in New Zealand. And aside from getting to experience 5 great cities in New Zealand, Christchurch, Dunedin, Auckland, all the cities you would think, I got to go down to the southern part of New Zealand. And I went there early so I could get myself on the time zone. And I had a crazy day. I call it my most extreme day of my life, where I bungee jumped, I jumped off a cliff and paraglided. And I went on this crazy boat ride that was probably the most dangerous thing of all time, where I'm going in between these caverns at 80, 90 miles an hour. And it's like, if I just stuck my elbow out, my arm would be gone. Okay. So that was a pretty crazy time. So I've done speeches on airplanes, cruise ships. It's been crazy, but it's been fun. I'd say that was pretty unique.
Third question, as we round the bases, you mentioned the term before, customer amazement. And I know that customer experience is your world, and which is not just customer service. It's so much about taking care of people and the experience, and not just your clients, but certainly your employees too.
Yes.
How would you describe customer amazement?
Amazement is within the grasp of everybody, and it is simply being a little better than average all of the time. And it's the all the time part that's tough. And what I mean by a little bit of better than average is I love doing business with that person or that company because they always call me back quickly. Calling me back quickly is not that big of a deal, but when you always do it, I like it, right? And it's like they're always so knowledgeable. When I call, they always have the answers. And how about a baseball player that always gets on base at least once every game or twice? That's the word, always, followed by something. They don't have to have the highest batting average, but they got a batting average that says consistently and predictably, this is what you can expect.
Yeah, we got a guy like that in Kansas City who's led the major leagues in hits each of the last 2 years, and the first right-handed batter to do so in consecutive seasons since Kirby Puckett. Second right-handed batter ever to do that. I think about it being easier from the left-hand side. We call him, his name's Whit Merrifield, we call him two-hit Whit. It's not 2 hits every night, but it seems like he set the franchise record for hitting streak, and he's always there.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily flashy. So it's exactly, that's a great
example. Yeah, you don't always have to hit the home run. Just get on base. No, you don't. And it can be a bunt to get on base. It could be a walk to get on base. It doesn't matter. You just get on base.
Totally agree with that. Final question, the walk-off, and it's one that I like to ask speakers for sure and others. What is, after all these years, 93, 03, 13, over 35 years of being on stages, add in the magic as a 16-year-old, and even more. I could have asked you a Playboy Club question, but we'll move on. I am intrigued by that too, of course. But what's the feeling like when you get off the stage, when you know you've made that impact on potentially thousands of lives?
I don't want to make it sound like I make true impact and change lives. My goal isn't so much the person as much as I want the organization to shift its culture. I want everybody to be successful. I know I've hit it out of the park. If the audience is happy, that's great. But when the client tells me a week later, this is what we're going to do as a result of that. So it happens after I get off stage, but it's a few days later when the client says, this is the difference. One of the questions, I know I'm going to give you a longer answer, but too bad. I'm going to give it to you anyway. One of the questions I like to ask my clients prior to, and it could be in the, we're thinking about using you, the stage. if we were to get together a year after this presentation, what would have to happen for this to be truly the best investment you've made in a speaker or a trainer that you brought into your company? And I give them time to think about it. They don't have to answer me in the moment, but when they give me that answer, that's my playbook for success. And that's where I'm going to follow up with them and say, all right, this is the beginning of the journey. Over the next year, this is what I want to see happen. And if they're into it and we're in alignment, I feel more fulfilled than ever.
It's what it's all about. And what an incredible responsibility and privilege to be able to do that and to have done that for so many years. You can hear, I hope, in this interview why Shep Hyken has been so successful with people, with organizations, traveled the world, Hall of Fame, Lifetime Achievement from the National Speakers Association. I will attest to what you said, but with much less experience, because I became a member in the last couple of years. I'm now sitting on the board in Kansas City. Met the most amazing people, continue to learn. That's what it's all about. And Shep, I really appreciate you spending the time here with me today. It's been phenomenal insight, and insight I believe that could affect everybody with whatever their profession is. At the end of the day, it's still about the way we treat people and the experiences that we give them.
Yep, amen to that.
Thanks for the time, Shep. Stay healthy. Continue to crank out all those virtuals behind that magic wall there. And I know that the world will be a better place when you're able to get back on stage, because that means we'll all be getting back to the way things were. Yeah. But again, not a new normal, just normal. I say this will be my final thought, and then I'll let you go. It's not healthy to say better or worse. It's just different. That's where we're at right now, right? Yep. It's just different. This is the way it is.
Yep. I think different is a great opportunity. Just grab what you can and exploit what you can out of it. And, what's there is there, and take advantage of it.
Well said. Shep, thanks for spending the time
Thanks,
today.
Joel. Thanks for having me. This has been awesome. Amazing.
I appreciate it. Yes, so it's been a customer amazement. If anyone wants to check it out, he's got an amazing, there's that word again, website with just everything that you could want. I transfixed. I'm not exaggerating here. I told him this, his video on stage, and it looks like there were drones and all kinds of cool stuff going on, all the toys, but it's beautiful video, phenomenal website. What I'm saying is it is a nice experience, visually appealing and engaging, to check out the website. So I encourage everybody to do that. Shep, again, thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon. Hang tight for 1 second, and we'll wrap things up here. Appreciate everybody checking things out. We've got one more show, and then the 4th of July. So hope to see everyone back here tomorrow. My name is Joel Goldberg. Appreciate the support of Enterprise Bank and Trust. #NoStoppingYou. And have a great Thursday, everyone. Stay safe.